Hello, I'm Nancy Pearlman with ECONEWS, a project of educational communications. We're here in Switzerland, in the beautiful city of Montreux, to visit a famous castle, to study bird migration in a wetland preserve, do a little wine tasting, and finally to hike high into the Alps to study the habitat of the mountain marmot.
The Castle of Chillon is the most visited monument in Switzerland and is part of the most visited castles in the whole world as well. It was built on a rock in the 12th century and taken over in the 16th century by the Bernese. They came down from northern Switzerland to conquer the French off of the Swiss territory. And since then, the Vaudois came over and conquered the Bernese off again. So throughout 600-700 years, it was taken over and over and over again by several different tribes and different cantons and different royal families. It is very famous for several reasons, mostly because of the Lord Baron, who wrote The Prisoner of Chillon in the dungeon below. He was in prison there for a couple of years, and you can still see today his signature engraved into the wall.
Steep stairs.
It was also famous during the same period because Mary Shelley used to stay here as well, and many people say she got inspired for the Frankenstein story from this castle. The castle today is open to public. You can go through the castle, through the dungeon, the prisons, the chambers, and you can actually recall as if you were there a couple of hundred years ago. Nothing much has changed apart from a couple of modern amenities, but you don't see them much.
I'm standing in the highest tower of the castle. Lake Geneva is over 1,000 feet below it.
Today you can also rent the place for unusual events, for business parties and private parties, but also once or twice a year they have medieval shows with musicians and artists and flamethrowers, and you can really picture yourself back a couple hundred years. The castle started out in the 12th century with a small piece of it, just a dungeon and just a controlled access into this area from the road. Throughout the next several hundreds of years, it was added on, more defense, more walls, higher walls. They go up to 20, 30 meters now. and got reinforced throughout all the ages.
A great way to see Lake Geneva and the surrounding towns is by solar-powered boat. And it's also a wonderful way to explore Les Grangettes Nature Reserve if you don't want to walk or bicycle.
Hi, I'm Roberta Linn from Office of Montreux-Vevey Tourism. Today we're going to visit Les Grangettes. It's a nature reserve and we are very privileged to be found under a bird highway where all the birds traveling from Scandinavia and migrating down to Africa pass right overhead. They stop to get some energy at the Les Grangettes, which is about 10 kilometer square nature reserve. And we're going to approach that in our solar boat today. We are so happy to have the solar boats available to us now. Before we could only go on bicycle or walking through the paths. People must stay on the paths because we are very concerned to not derange or bother the birds which are nesting and getting their energy so they can fly over the Alps as they're traveling south. So with the solar boat, we're allowed to approach more quietly without disturbing the nesting of the birds. We hope we'll see some of those very special birds today. We find every year the variety of birds changes, and we are very happy to find many birds which we thought had disappeared have come back to nest, and we hope we'll see some of those today.
I'm Richard Linn from Montreux-Vevey Tourism. I'd like to present to you the Grangettes Natural Reserve, which is over 10 square miles. There's over 130 species of birds you can find in this reserve, where there's many migration birds that add on to the local birds. And in January is the peak season, where you can find up 15,000 birds you can be looking at. The ecosystem of the reserve is mostly swamps. The migration birds coming down from Scandinavia and Siberia tend to stop here for an hour, a week, or a month. And depending on their energy, they either fly over the mountain down to Africa, or they go down towards the lake, down to Geneva. The main use of the natural reserve is for protection of the local birds and for the migration birds. Many ducks come to nest, and it's also many fish nesting here.
Je suis Jean-Marc Fivat, photographe naturaliste. Je suis guide.
This is Jean-Marc Fivat. He's an official guide for the Natural Reserve. As you can see behind me, there's a tree on an island. The tree is over 150 years old. It's a small natural island of 10 square meters. You would think it's the only island on this part of the lake, but actually the castle to your left is also built on an island. The cormorant birds, as you can see, are coming back from their daily fishing hunt. They actually come down from all the way from Holland. In the year 563, a big chunk of the mountain, as you can see in the distance, fell down into the lake, which created a tsunami and destroyed many of the shorelines all the way down towards Geneva.
Is that a grebe?
Yes, it is. It's actually a great crested grebe, and there are more here than in all of France.
They nest here.
Yes, there's 350 couples nesting here. They come down from all over Eastern Europe. The eider bird comes all the way down from Scandinavia. It mainly is from Iceland. The down is famous for making jackets and pillows.
What's so special about this river is that the glacier water coming down from the Alps comes down to feed this delta which empties into the Lake Léman. The water arrives here very cold. The river is cold, the cold river, and the water enters the lake and drops down. The lake is 1,000 feet deep. The cold water drops down and warms up as it passes out. It grows out at the Geneva end, and this is the beginning of the Rhone River. The nature reserve that's around here has been protected from the beginning of times, where this agricultural area, the river would overflow and fertilize the land on both sides, and this is the garden of Switzerland.
Here you're looking at the beaver dam. Beavers are very rare in Switzerland. There's only about 350 animals in the whole of the country. Around it you can see many different types of trees and plants. Some are local, some come from very far away and are exotic, dropped by seeds carrying by the birds migrating here.
The fruit and vegetables grown in the Valais, this end of the lake, provides most of the fruit and vegetables at our marketplaces throughout Switzerland. So we're very happy that a long time ago they decided to protect this reserve for the birds that fly through, but also to keep the original species of trees and plants that would naturally be growing here, brought by birds, and which would naturally grow because of the climate. We do see some climate changes. The level of the pine trees are moving higher. This is part of the global warming, and we see the species of changes, the trees are changing. So we're losing some, and new ones, more tropical, are arriving. So we see a constant change. Oh, we have a little friend saying hello.
The United Nations has declared this a Ramsar site, a special designation for very important ecological areas.
Yes, like the Everglades in Florida. That was in 1990, but this has been a protected site since the early 1800s. And here there are special permission for these boats to be kept in here for protection. It's a harbor, and they have access to the lake, but in a very small channel. Les Grangettes comes from the word grange, and the grange is a grain storage house. Oh, originally there were many grain storage houses here, but that was a very long time ago. And they called it Les Grangettes because it was a main place to store the grain when in the 1700s the grain was transported on the lake by the large barks. There were no roads, or the roads were by horse and carriage and wagons, so the grain was transported by these big ships. We see lots of green color and not too many flowers at this time of the year, but we do have some very special species of endemic flowers that we will find in the spring and the summer. And if we were to take a walk in the woods, we would find some very unusual, beautiful flowers. Several times a year, we will read in the newspaper that it's cleanup time, and people will put on their Wellingtons and come down to the Grangette and help to clean up the debris which is brought down by the river.
Are there rare and endangered species here, and plants and animals found no place else in Switzerland?
Oh yes, there is a list rouge, or red list as we call it, of endangered species. And the darning needle is always a sign that nature is working well, and they have been less in the last few years. We also find birds and flowers and insects, especially the insects. There was a lot of drainage, and because of that, the insects have disappeared in great numbers, and it is a concern. We don't like to have bugs sometimes, but they are part of nature and very important in the ecosystem.
What is the darning needle?
It's a dragonfly.
Must be very pretty.
It's beautiful, and it's always a sign that nature is in balance.
I see a duck. What kind is it?
That's a mallard duck, a privet, and as you notice, it's sleeping. It stands on one foot when it sleeps. I just woke up.
I think there's a whole family in there of ducks.
There they are, nesting right in the reeds.
Their nest is right there in the reeds.
Right in there. These are berries which in French we call sorbier des oiseaux. It's special berries that the birds feed the birds, and I think it's just called bird berries.
You can hardly see them. They blend right in.
That's nature. Here we see a barrier which has been, it's floating, and it's there to capture any wood which is coming down the Rhone River. This can be a great danger to the boats in the lake, so we try to catch the wood, especially when there's a storm up further up the Rhone River. Then you see the barge which collects all the wood, and they grind it up and they bring it back and they pile it up in the background there, and it's used for gardens and very good compost. And here we see the seagulls that also come down and feed themselves and have a nice little place to stand on the barrier. This is the beginning of the Rhone River. This is where the Rhone River, the delta where it flows into the lake. There is a second one to the right called the Stockhalper Canal, and the small river we were just up watching in the nature reserve, there are plans to enlarge and make another canal which will allow the nature reserve to have flooding at times of great storms, and that way we'll create smaller little islands and more natural scenes for the birds and the other animals to develop. You're looking at the newest sport here. This is called paddle boarding. This is the newest sport in Switzerland on our lakes. Windsurfing is also very popular, but we have many days when there's not enough wind, so people can come out and stand up and paddle. Here we have also another sport on the lake is kayaking and canoeing, and we also have many of the rowing clubs that are also the aviron on the lake. There are many local clubs for boating. And here we can see some of the debris that's brought down the Rhone River. And if you could look carefully, the sun is difficult to see. The color of the water changes drastically because as the Rhone River flows into the lake, it creates a very deep ravine of 50 meters down. And you can see here the difference in the color of the water. See, it's very cold and very clear, and then it drops down 50 meters. That water runs along the bottom of the lake because of the cold temperature, and it comes out in Geneva. By the time it reaches Geneva, it is warmed up again, and as there's a river right beside Geneva that mixes with the Rhone River, you will see that for a while the water is striped, the color because of the temperature differences. The white color is also caused by the limon, which is the minerals that are brought down the river, and that's much thicker than the normal water in the lake.
We've just gotten off the train at one of the small stops to be able to walk through the vineyards that have been here since the 1100s. In 2007, they were declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We're here at the famous vineyards that have been here since the 12th century, and yet this is a very modern ecological building, the visitor center.
Well, actually, the Romans brought the first wine to this region. And it was only in the 12th century that the monks built the terraced walls that we see here now. And when this Vinorama was conceived, it opened in 2008, it was supposed to represent another terrace. And that's why we have from the exterior a decoration that looks like wine, the plants, the grapes on the outside. So this is supposed to look like a terrace.
And in addition to that, it utilizes very efficient energy.
Yes, the idea was to integrate the building into the rocks and to use the minergy, is what we call the ecological buildings that are using the most efficient energy. We have walls here which are 56 meters thick. There are 2 stone walls separated by air in between to give it perfect insulation.
I can feel how comfortable it is in here. And they can have conferences and meetings as well.
Exactly. This room is specially built so that you have a view on the lake through the decor, and it is used for banks and big executives from many of the larger companies around here to have their private meetings.
We're looking at just some of the labels of the wine available in the region. How many are there?
Oh, so in here at the Vinorama, there are more than 230 labels available. And these ones are made out of 8 places of production in the Lavaux region.
And how many acres are there in wine production?
800.
And it's been around since the 1100s?
Even before that, the Romans brought the first wine to this region and found it grew so well in this rocky soil. But it was the monks in the 12th century that built these beautiful rock terraces. And that's why the Lavaux claims that we have 3 suns. We have the sun in the sky, the sun reflected off the lake, and the sun reflected off these beautiful stone walls.
Let's go have a taste. We've taken the easy way up here on a cog railway to enjoy these gorgeous views, but these guys have hired a guide and climbed straight up the rock. local flower. In this flower garden, there are over 1,000 high alpine species from all over the world. There are so many more peaks to climb and great outdoor adventures here in the Lake Geneva region. On behalf of Educational Communications and ECONEWS, I'm Nancy Pearlman, wishing you a natural, unspoiled environment.